Velkommen til et nytt program fra Åpne Dører. I dag så har vi en spennende gjest som har vært 15 år i Midtøsten, nærmere bestemt Irak. Welcome, William.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
You told me that you have been in different countries before you ended up in Iraq.
Right.
You have been in Pakistan.
Right. Working with Afghan refugees for a couple of years. Worked in Soviet Central Asia with disabled children, deaf, blind, mentally handicapped children. And the last nearly 20 years in Iraq.
And when you first came to Iraq, that was almost in a war situation. How was that?
Yeah, that was. I moved to Iraq the end of 2002, and I helped in a project with street children, and we had staff working doing activities, and we received the warnings that this war was coming, and the different government organizations told us we had to make one of the rooms gas-proof. Because in another war with Saddam Hussein, he used poisonous gas. So the warning was now everybody staying in the country, they had to have one room which was gas-free, with supplies for a couple of days. And so we were told to do this, and we prepared the room. We put tape on the windows so that when there were explosions, the glass would not fly all through the room. And we were all prepared for that. So I tried to keep on encouraging our local staff, like, look, nothing will happen because the Allied army, they will stop Saddam from coming here. They would be safe. And in the town that we were, that there would be no serious incident apart from maybe one or two bombs. So then our plan was that we were going back home like in March, and we were actually on the road going back. We had to go via Damascus, so we were on the road in the bus to Damascus when the second Gulf War started. And I've really felt like betraying my friends. Like there's no way of telling when the war would start, so we didn't plan it. It's just that we had a ticket for that day. But because I was leaving the country, the war was starting, I felt like I want to go back. It's like betraying my friends, leaving them when the danger happens, and I should be with them.
Normally, I think that some people, for example me, would think that I was lucky to get out on that day, but you was opposite.
Yeah. Over the years, we've learned that unfortunately, when problems happen in those countries, the Westerners tend to be the first ones out. And they leave the local people facing the troubles. And because we're working with the church, we felt like we don't want to be out of the country when they really need us. So we always had it in our mind that we want to be with the people when danger happens. Not because of the danger, but because we want to support the local church. And when we were on the way out, which we couldn't have planned, we felt like the principle that we were standing for, we were betraying our own principles, like we want to be with the Christians and with the non-Christians, just with our friends. So that was pretty difficult. I was a couple of weeks after that I was depressed. I was laying on the sofa in the living room. That even my wife said, "What's wrong?" And she became quite worried that there was something else than just the depression about going back and being with our friends. So then we grabbed the opportunity in that following summer when the position opened to go back. We both went back. Well, I went first in the summer, my wife followed a couple of months later after the place was ready, and we stayed there for the next 18 years.
You stayed there. And so you have seen Iraq in different phases of war.
Right, and the different wars. The one with Saddam, a couple of months before, and the months after the war was finished. during the transition that the Allied had this temporary government in Baghdad and how they controlled the Kurdish people in the north. And then, of course, also when Islamic State came into play. We stayed during that time, so we didn't leave the country at all.
How was it when the Islamic State came? Because here back in Norway and in Europe, we heard this on the news and it was so terrible. And I guess it was even more terrible being there.
We were not directly facing ISIS fighters, so we were at a reasonable safe distance, and they were stopped before they could come to us. But on the night that it happened, we started to receive phone calls that the Christians were leaving the Christian towns and the villages and coming to the safe region of Kurdistan. Fortunately, we had our networks with the churches, so when the Christians started calling, we are in front of a checkpoint and we have no water. And normally this journey would only be 45 minutes, but then the journey could take 12 hours, 24 hours. And during the day with hot sun, 35, 45 Celsius, of course people needed water. So when we started receiving the phone calls, we could straight away phone to the churches and the church leaders that we knew in that region, can you please bring water or lunch or food, whatever, so the Christians wouldn't have these difficulties. But yeah, I can tell you stories of what happened. It's very gripping. It's heart-wrenching what happened with, not only with the Christians, of course, but with all the people. But because we were involved with the Christians, it's like nightmare scenarios.
Yeah, if you would give us one or two faces, just please do.
One of the church leaders went with his village, the Christians from his village. They went through the fields, having to go to the safe areas of Erbil. And we saw pictures on his mobile phone that the field that they were walking through, there were dead bodies on either side of the path, and you had to take people through this area, and the families, children, to get to a safe zone during the night. So when you hear this, it just another priest, he said in his church they had 6 highly pregnant women, and of course, during the night, they had to give birth, which is very unfortunate.
In the church?
No, Christians, while they were fleeing to the safe region. And during the night, these 6 women gave birth. And 3 of the women was okay, the baby survived, and 3 lost their babies. So you can't do anything. And of course, one of the ladies raised big questions, crying to God, like, why did this happen? And she actually said that she and her husband have been praying for like 10, 15 years to have this baby. And just when the first baby was to be born, this whole incident happened. Now, it wasn't an attack by ISIS, just the fact that they had to flee and the whole situation, it was just horrific.
So the people just suffered so much.
No, they had to go live on the streets the first couple of weeks. The Christians, being threatened by the Muslims, they didn't want to move into camps where the Muslims were living, which is obvious because the Muslims were killing them, threatening them. They had to run away from the Muslims, so they had to stay on the streets.
So this was only about ISIS?
This was about ISIS.
It was about ISIS, but
right.
Muslim neighbors or Muslim, would they help out or what happened?
They took the advantage, the Muslim neighbors in Mosul. When the Christians had to flee the houses, they immediately took the houses. They stole everything that was there. So they basically betrayed the Christian neighbors. we were told some families, they shared babysitting, they had meals together with the Muslims, but the minute ISIS came, the vast majority of the people in Mosul, they supported ISIS. So the Christians felt threatened by their neighbors from 25 years. So they had the thing like, you cannot trust a Muslim anymore because this is what they do. So they had to run away. They didn't want to live in the camp with the Muslims because in their understanding, if you live with a Muslim, you have to dress up with Muslims, you have to behave like Muslims. Our girls will be under threat by the people in the camp. So they had to live on the streets, and initially they were on cardboard boxes, just on the trees, for a whole week. That's how we first met them, just on the streets and in the parks. And then slowly the aid came, and first the basic tents came, and then that developed into nice tents, and then they had caravans.
How long time did it take from it happened until the aid came from outside?
For the tents, it was like 2 or 3 weeks. So that first week people were just in cardboard boxes, plastic above their heads. And then slowly the churches with the aid organization, they set up tents in the churchyards. And then people moved into unfinished buildings, and they got the mattresses, and then it started rolling. But one of the fathers, one of the priests told us, in this time, these 3 years, the worst period, the worst time of the day for women is daytime. And then he explained, because they came from a house situation, they had a garden, they had to clean the house, so they were always busy. And suddenly they're in a caravan from 3 to 7 meters, full day with the family. And it's okay for 1 or 2 weeks, but to do that for 3 years, it's really nightmare situation. So I can also understand all the other refugees sitting in tents for a long period of time. In Holland we go camping, 3 weeks camping, we love that. But if it stretches longer than 3 weeks, it becomes very difficult. Just imagine 3 years in a caravan, in the summer with 40 Celsius, 50 Celsius, it's too hot inside, and outside it's too hot. So it's very difficult for the people to live in those conditions.
And so there are different phases, because you have when the incident happened, and then you have different phases after that, and this phase when they are living, just existing and don't know how long will this be.
Right.
That is what you're talking about.
That's right, yeah. The initial phase, like 2 or 3 weeks before all the aid came and the tents were set up, and then this was followed by relief parcels. Now, we are not a relief organization, but because of the need, we felt like we have to help the families. And because the Christians were not in the government camps, they did not get any aid from the government. So we felt we really have to provide the families with food parcels. So we were providing 15,000 food parcels every month. And that was only for half of the month, so other agencies had to provide the other half.
And one parcel was meant to help one family?
One family, yes. With 5 people.
So what happened after a while, after they got aid and got food parcels, when starting building again? What did you do then?
Yeah, we realized that job creation was a big thing. Like they all had to leave their jobs behind, and they had no more income. So we jumped in to see what jobs the people wanted to do, and support them in doing the jobs that they were doing in the villages. So if it was a welder, we would see if we could help them with the welding machine, and he could restart his business. Or a shoemaker, provide a little stall so he can start making shoes again. So that's where we jumped in vocational training, small grants to restarting businesses. Because it's no good for anyone to sit on the chair for the whole week, So we felt like it's important to give the people their dignity back and helping them to start earning their income.
And that has also to do with motivation for life. If you're just inactive. When you start doing something, you start work again.
But it's the dignity of people. That's the important thing. If they're just in a camp for 2 years and they're not earning their own income, sorry to say, but a lot of people will become very lazy, and they start losing trust in themselves, and they start thinking, I'm good for nothing. So we really felt like the people need a job. They need to do something, also to get the mind at ease. And it supported also for the time after the refugee camps, because people were planning to go back home. And if you help them create already little job, they can then transfer that little job back to the homes and villages and the towns and continue. And that would help in the re-establishing of the communities. So we felt that was quite important to do.
And we know that some small communities have been re-established, like Karakosh.
Right.
Have you been involved in rebuilding houses?
Yes, in several of the towns. The wonderful thing is that the churches were very organized. So the church leaders, they got small committees together with engineers, architects. They would assess the houses, because 80% of the houses were destroyed, either burned or totally ransacked, everything taken out. So they started to assess the houses, and then they came back to us saying, okay, these are the costs to repair a house. So far we have supported 1,500 houses, so the people can move back into their houses. Because it's no good to tell the people, you have to go back to your homes, and they come back to a house which hasn't got anything. So we try to support them go back to the homes, and at the same time enable them to do so, like repainting, putting new windows in, doors in kitchens, and just help the repairs.
And that is so good that we can be able to help so they can go back. But it's not safe in Iraq yet, is it?
The reports that we get from the Christians is that ISIS might be defeated, Daesh, as they call it, might be defeated, the Islamic extremists, but they're not gone. So for Iraq, they say 17,000 ISIS fighters went underground, so they are regarded to be in sleeper cells. And any moment they can jump up and do the attacks again. And some people have said to the Christians, like, if this happens again, another one of those Islamic attacks, we will all join them again, and it will be worse than the first time. So the Christians, they don't feel happy, because the government is doing very little in protecting their region. Now, there are different ways for the solution of creating the security, but basically the Christians don't feel safe yet, because they don't see the government is giving that security for them to be safe. So yeah, the Christians feel constantly threatened that anything might happen again.
And we have heard some numbers of how many Christians still live in Iraq. Which numbers?
Yeah, the latest report that we were told, we were given just a few days ago, is that the total number of Christians in Iraq is below 150,000.
And originally it was?
Pre-Saddam, there were between 1.5 to 2 million Christians. During Saddam's time, until 2003, when Saddam was forced out, was defeated, 1 million Christians already left. They reckon in mid-2003, 500,000 Christians were still in Iraq. So, and then now it's less than 150,000, so you can say only less than 10% of the original Christian population is still in Iraq.
And how do you see it? Will they try to leave, or will they want to stay?
We can understand that people want to leave an unsafe country. where you constantly feel threatened. We can totally understand, but we would so much love to encourage the Christians to stay in the country. It's the birthplace of Christianity. It's the birthplace of the Bible, the history of the Bible. It's in the ground. You can see it all around you. So if the Christians, all of them, were forced to leave the country, it would be so bad for the country itself. So we really encourage the Christians to stay in the country, and we would do everything possible to encourage them to stay in the country, with vocational training, with trauma training, because there's so much pain, with education, job creation, anything possible to keep the Christians and move them back into their villages. We see as our priority.
If you should challenge the Christians in Norway to what can they do to help, what will you say?
Of course, it goes without saying, you have to pray. And the Christians have been saying this to us. I was there a few days ago, and they said, we keep on telling them, the Christians in the West are praying for you. And they're thanking us for that. Also, all the time they say, we know, thank you so much, because if you were not praying, there would have been worse things happening. And now they're telling us, please don't stop praying, because now there's relative calm. All the trauma comes up, and all the stories, what happened over these last years, it's all coming to the surface. And people are battling with the most horrific things that children have seen things that they should never be seeing, and now the trauma is starting. So they're telling us, please don't stop praying. You have to pray for the Christians in Iraq and for the Christians in Syria. They suffer the same issues. So please don't stop praying. And then, of course, if you can help practically, that would be wonderful, of course, as well.
Thank you so much, William. Til deg som har følt oss denne lille halvtimen og fått et innblikk i arbeid blant kristne i Irak og hva de går gjennom, vær med og be. Takk for i dag.